Welcome to another edition of Weather and Climate Chat. My name is Monsoon Mike, and I'm here in the studio with my weekly weather comrade, Dr. Michael Davis. Dr. Davis, welcome to the show.
Good for having me again.
What's today's date? 27th. So
27th.
we're recording this on September 27th. I always like to put the date out there just so that people are aware if they're listening to it a day after or a day after that. The big story here in our neck of the woods over the past week has been some absolutely incredible heat. In fact, some areas recorded an official heat wave with 3 consecutive days at or above 90. What the heck was that all about?
So there's several factors that are at play here, and one of them is the very strong high-pressure system that's sitting over the eastern United States, and the resulting ridge in the jet stream, which is currently in northern Ontario and Quebec. And that's partly in response to what Maria is doing offshore, and also because of the very strong trough that's sitting out in the western part of the United States. Typically, meteorologists will look at something known as the Pacific North Atlantic Oscillation, the PNA.
I saw you post about that last week, yeah.
And what that typically shows us is the ridge and trough pattern across the United States. Normally, you have a ridge across the western part of the United States because of how the westerly winds interact with the Rocky Mountains. It causes the winds to go pretty much to the north, and then it dives down along the western side of the Great Plains, leading to a trough in the east. That's a positive Pacific North Atlantic PNA.
Right.
But what we're seeing now is a negative one where you have that trough sitting in the west and a ridge sitting in the east. So the pattern's pretty much flipped. And as a result, we have this ridge that's sitting over the eastern United States from this negative PNA. But the strength of this PNA is quite remarkable. Weather Service is saying something along the lines of 4 standard deviations above the mean, leave it that way. And that's resulting in this pretty much this warm spell that we're seeing in the eastern United States.
Right. Now, of course, we could then question the natural thing becomes, why did this happen? And I see the National Weather Service, Mount Holly, in their discussion today, are partially putting the blame, and I'll get your feelings on this, on all of our hurricanes of recent weeks, Irma, Jose, and now Maria. I'm not going to read that whole thing to you that I read off the air, but basically they're saying that an analysis has shown that latent heat release of these storms has contributed to that substantial ridge amplification in the eastern North America and the adjacent Atlantic during this period. So basically, to make in very layman's terms, without the technical stuff, all the hot air from these storms is giving us hot air up here. Is that a good way to describe it?
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
You have the release of latent energy, as I talked about, through the condensation process.
Okay.
And that's pretty much how hurricanes derive their strength, is from that release of latent energy. So if you have the system that's been sitting where Maria is right now and what we have with Jose earlier last week, that's been a lot of energy that's been injected into that ridge, and that amplification could have resulted as a factor of the presence of these tropical systems. Very
interesting interesting analysis there, and I think that probably does have something to do with it, because earlier this month, looking at long range, it didn't look quite as, it looked a little above normal for the end of September, but not quite as to the extreme that we were. So those storms probably did have something to do with it.
Yes, and I wouldn't even rule out the fact that you have Irma that came through before Jose, which may have set the stage, so to speak, for
they mentioned Irma, Jose, and Maria. Yeah, they mentioned all
for
three.
The amplification of the trough. I mean, amplification of the ridge.
Ridge.
Well,
exactly.
you can say the trough too, I guess, because kind of one feeds into the other.
One goes the other. So the west coast gets cooler weather, and we get the hot air. Now for fall lovers,
if I may,
go for it, please.
Interject here. We had some snowfall in Montana, Idaho, and I think parts of Wyoming as a result of all this cold air that's sitting in the mountainous west.
I'm jealous of them because you know me with winter weather.
Well, mainly from elevational changes.
Right. True.
But the cold air helps.
Right. Now, for autumn lovers like me who have not liked the past few days at all, we do have a little bone to throw to you over the coming days. Finally, we have a cold front that's going to be coming through, looks like early Thursday. We'll refrain from using words like tonight or tomorrow, depending on when you're listening to this. But early Thursday-ish, it looks like we have a cold front coming
overnight Wednesday into early Thursday would be my assumption.
And so that'll drop temperatures on Thursday back to more normal levels, still above normal, I think. I think tomorrow the Weather Service is going with about 75, 74. That's still a couple ticks above normal. But then we get a reinforcing cold front come through, Friday night, I believe. And that'll send our temperatures back to maybe even a little below normal for this weekend, which will be...
Some of the low temperatures I was seeing was around the mid-40s.
Yeah, it looks like we have a 73 a 73 on Thursday, a 48 Thursday night, a 69 Friday, a 49 Friday night, 65 Saturday, and a 45 Saturday night. So, and a 46 Sunday night. So crisp. Back to some fall-like weather.
No, we are in fall anyway. So.
You wouldn't know it the past few days, but we are. The other thing to talk about is this bone-dry pattern, which is a total of 180 from what we put up with over the past couple months, where it seems that, every little thing would give us 4 inches of rain. Now we've had hardly any appreciable rain, and looking at the long range, we might not have appreciable rain for another week or more.
Yeah,
what's that about?
We had a very wet July, I believe it was, and then August. And then September, we've started to dry out, and it looks like that is going to extend into mid to early October. And that's pretty much from the ridge that's sitting in place.
In fact, as we're recording this on Wednesday, the only chance of showers on the National Weather Service, and the GFS model agrees with that, is maybe a little something Friday night into Saturday as a little low pressure from the Great Lakes tries to zip through the area with the reinforcing shot of cold air. Other than that, really nothing. So a lot of sunshine.
Yeah, we're going to be pretty moisture starved for the next week or two. And... hopefully we get something out of it, because we haven't received any rainfall, I think, for about a week now.
Yeah, and if these long-ranger models are correct, that we could go for another week or two, that puts us at close to a month before we would have appreciable rain. So
yeah, so that...
Do we start throwing around the D word at that point, drought, or... Is that a concern at this point, or is all that rain over the summer protecting us a little bit?
We do have an excess amount from the summer, so we can't afford to have some dry weather, but at some point we do need the water to come back into the soil. Yeah,
and looking at 6 to 10 day outlook from the Climate Prediction Center for precipitation, looks below normal. 8 to 14 day, kind of below normal as well. 1 month outlook, though, for October, equal chances. So hopefully maybe mid-October or later October we get some beneficial rains, but we just don't see a whole lot, at least into the first week of October, coming anytime soon.
Sorry, I'm looking up the
That's okay.
Current Palmer Drought Severity Index.
Okay.
And we're still about average.
Okay.
No... dry weather or wet weather we expected. Now we're having a lot in the way of extreme drought in the west, like Wyoming and Montana, and we're having a lot of way of moisture in the soil in, say, the southeastern United States from the tropical systems that pass through.
Right.
Interestingly enough, in the western part of the Great Lakes, so around Wisconsin, the UP of Michigan. But other than that, it looks pretty normal in the mid-Atlantic.
Okay.
The only thing that really stands out to me is an area of drought conditions.
Okay.
That could be in eastern Ohio and into central West Virginia.
Okay.
And some moisture across Lake Ontario basin of the upstate New York and into western New York.
So generally, the moral of the story is generally dry weather for the coming week at least, maybe beyond that. Lots of sunshine, temperatures getting more normal for this weekend and early next week, but some longer range models imply, and the Weather Service mentioned it as well, that mid next week, mid to late next week, we could be back above normal temperature-wise again. Probably not to the extreme of this. I would hope that the 90s are done now at this point, but you never know.
I would think that they are myself.
I would hope. But the 80s might not be. You never know.
I will say that thanks to this respite that we're going to get once this front passes through, that the temperature will be much more comfortable for the week. If we still had this ridge in place and with the drought conditions, we probably would be seeing these 90s persist.
And it's been very, very humid as well, too. The dew points have been high. It's been very humid. If we do get above normal temperature-wise mid to the end of next week, do you at least think the humidity stays within check and doesn't get out of control like it did the past couple of days?
With the frontal passage, I would assume that the dew point is going to be dropping.
Okay, all right.
And that seems to be what we're seeing in the models and in the observations with the frontal passage itself.
Good, all right.
So I got to go with the dew points dropping.
Good, that's what we can hope for, because I've not been a fan of this, but I know a lot of people that were a fan of this. I know people that were opening up their pools again and such. We've got a little bit of time. We've pretty much discussed, I don't know if you want to touch on it a little bit just for the remaining 5 minutes. I try to keep this around 15 minutes. Kind of putting you on the spot here, although I did give you a little bit of a prep on it last week. Just a little, I read an article from the National Weather Service that we're already talking about La Nina possibly being for an prevalent for this coming late fall into early winter. You want to talk a little bit about that and what that means, what that might mean?
Typically with La Nina, you get cooler waters in the Pacific Ocean.
Okay.
And that typically enhances the tropical activity that we're seeing in the Atlantic. So you could draw the conclusion that with the La Nina emerging that it should influence the hurricanes and tropical systems of the Atlantic, which we're definitely seeing some activity there. Now, with La Nina 2, that typically means a little bit in the way of a warmer northeast. So for the winter.
Right.
So it might be a little bit more on the wet side, maybe more rain than actual snow. And La Nina has also been speculated to be contributing to large tornado outbreaks and severe weather in the following spring. So whether or not the spring of 2018 could see a lot in the way of tornadoes and severe weather, that could be in the cards. For the lay people that don't understand this stuff, how is, and I'm going to try to find that article on the fly here, how is the National Weather Service able to forecast that we might have a stronger La Nina this coming months? They use their models essentially to look at sea surface temperatures and take into consideration things like the trade wind strength and the amount of upwelling that's occurring off the western coast of Central America.
Okay, yeah, I just found this article. It looks like there'll be a pretty good chance of a neutral or average. A La Nina watch issued by the Climate Prediction Center for the fall and winter months that relates to cooler sea surface temperatures in the Pacific Ocean, which has an impact on weather across North America. So they've actually issued a La Nina watch, I guess you could say. Yeah,
and frankly, it doesn't sound like they're too concerned with it getting into something dramatic.
Right.
Like what we saw with the El Nino event 2 years ago now. I'm trying to remember when the Godzilla El Nino was. I think it was 2 years ago.
They had all kinds of cutesy names for that. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
That was a significant El Nino event where we had a lot in the way of moisture coming into the western United States as a result of the El Nino year.
Gotcha.
That also tied in with our 30 some odd inches of snow we got.
Yeah.
Typically with a stronger El Nino, you get more snowfall in the New England and Mid-Atlantic region.
Right. Okay. Well, there you have it, folks. We're at about 15 minutes. Just to recap, this incredible stretch of heat that we had is just about done. We're going to have a nice, cool, autumnal weekend, but then we do creep back up temperature-wise a little bit next week. Probably not to the point of this week, but still warmer than average. And then the other big headline is not much rain to talk about except for maybe a shower here or there over the weekend. Other than that, pretty much dry, sunny, autumnal weather coming up.
Yeah, I personally wouldn't bank too much on that weekend system, but we'll see what happens.
Well, notice I said a small chance. I think the weather service has about a 20% chance, so they're not banking too much on it either, but they're putting it out there just in case.
Yeah, maybe try to throw us a bone at least.
Yeah, okay. All right, Dr. Michael Davis, thank you so much. I am Monsoon Mike. We'll join you again next week.
Sounds good.